Welcome back to the Elle-Sera podcast. Today we have special guest Lee Chambers joining us, who's an expert in the fields of male allyship, gender equality, inclusive leadership, and menopause in the workplace. It's a fantastic conversation that really hits home why we need to be inclusive and allow our individuals to be just that, individuals, for greater success in the workplace and in life. Enjoy the chat. Hi, Lee. Thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
Right, so I was reading your CV and can I just say I was blown away. So I'm going to introduce you by reading out what you've done and what you're all about. So you're a psychologist, you're an entrepreneur, a male ally and a speaker. You're the founder of Phenom Games. Am I saying that right?
You are?
Essential workshops for workplace wellbeing. You've been interviewed by Vogue, The Guardian, Newsweek. You're known for analysing psychological aspects of the workplace's wellbeing and intersectionality. We'll get into what that means later. Mm-hmm. You're one of the UK's leading voices on male allyship and gender equality. You've also been named as Marie Claire's Future Shaper 2022 alongside Harry Styles and Tom Daley. You were inducted into the Black Cultural Archives in 2022 for services to business and health. You've widely published by the BBC Healthline Medical News. You've also featured as an expert in the IKEA docuseries, It Won't Feel Like Home Until It Feels Like You. I mean, I could go on. You're an unbelievable entrepreneur. You've been listed as one of the best entrepreneurs at the Great British Entrepreneur Awards. You've also been named into the 100 Index of Startups. You're a rising star for gender balance. Wow. I mean, I could go on and on. I've got a list here. So when I was preparing for this podcast, I was thinking, where do I begin? I actually have prepared questions. But first of all, I think we should start with, what is a male ally?
Yeah, so I suppose allyship as a concept is something that a lot of people are starting to talk about a lot more. I suppose allyship is actually a set of skills about considering how we can support other people who are potentially different to ourselves. You know, we get on, if you think about people who who are, really like you just click, you get on, you can talk to them for hours, you've got lots of things in common. But it's starting to think about, what about people who have different backgrounds, people who have different lives? How can you support them? Find some of the things you have in common, but also embrace and celebrate the differences. Understand that in the world that we live in today, some people have access to more opportunities than others, simply due to, where they grew up, who they are, the people they're surrounded by. And ultimately, it's about walking with people to make the workplace fairer. But also, allyship isn't just for the workplace, it starts at home.
Yeah. Okay. How important is it to have allies within the workplace? And I suppose it's critical for success of that business. So do you go in and look at the business setup in a corporate setting and look at how they can maybe support, the diversity of their staff to get more out of the business?
Yeah, I suppose we do quite a lot of things. So firstly, we build the skills of allyship. Things such as listening to people with different viewpoints, such as how do you support people from different backgrounds to yourself. The skills around allyship are actually, we build them into leadership. We get them to think, how do you build teams where people are different, but you get everyone to work together towards the same goal? Because fundamentally, that's what businesses are trying to do. And really, allyship is thinking, what are the skills that allow you to think, okay, I'm in a position potentially of leadership, for example. How can I take people on that journey with me? But not just all the same people who are like me. How can I take different people on that journey? So it's thinking about how you can potentially support others. But what's really important about allyship is everyone has the ability to be an ally to someone. Sometimes that's through sponsoring them on the journey, speaking about them when they're not in the room, supporting them in their own learning and development, thinking about opportunities that exist, sometimes within your control, sometimes a bit wider. It might be referring someone in to another opportunity somewhere else. And obviously allyship is the ability to have that bit of empathy and consideration for what other people are going through that you might not go through yourself. And obviously a big part of allyship is, different groups can support each other. Like I've had allies on my own journey who supported me, because sometimes you face barriers when you're black that you don't have if you're white. And I've had allies who supported me through some racism, for example. But I, as a man, generally have more privilege than a woman. So I can think about how I can use my privilege to actually support someone else. And there are ways and means to be able to do that. and think about how you can kind of understand some of the challenges that people go through. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sat here talking to you today.
Well, it is, yeah. So that's how kind of we came in contact with each other through the menopause space, actually. And the fact that you are an ally for women going through the menopause and you talk about menopause in the workplace. How important is it, do you think, that men do understand what's going on with women and the menopause?
Well, it's massively important, Alyssa, because if we look at the reality in the UK, 52% of the population are women, and 52% of the population are guaranteed to go through menopause, which means that ultimately not many things are guaranteed for over half of the population. In fact, what is probably birth, death, and taxes?
Yeah.
That's about it. So it's one of the things that is absolutely guaranteed. But because it's guaranteed for over half of the population to have an impact, it also has an indirect impact on everyone. And every man has a partner or family or friends or colleagues above, peers, and below who are women and will go through it. And obviously, some individuals can go through it for different reasons based on, being medically induced. Some people can go through it incredibly young due to, surgery or medical challenges that they have. So it isn't just this, just impacts women of a certain age.
Yeah,
thing.
it's not just a women's issue, it's a societal issue.
It's a societal issue, and everyone plays a role because it impacts men significantly. And if you don't realize it's impacting you, it might be someone who you lead on your team or someone who's managing you. It might be your partner at home. It might be a family member. It might be one of your close friends. But that little bit of knowledge around it can help you understand the impact that it's having on you as a man, help you to be able to see where you might potentially be able to support, and actually, empowers you to be able to learn about something that you will not go through yourself. But everyone around you, so many people will be going through it. And if you have that bit of understanding and bit of knowledge, it can mean that as you go around the world, you actually understand other people better and might not jump to conclusions and assumptions as quickly. And that gives you the chance not only to respond better to those who are going through the menopause, but just to think what else other people might be going through that you're not aware of, that's actually shaping how they behave and how they interact. Just makes you a bit wiser and a bit more kind to yourself as well.
I always remember there was a really famous interview with Diane Abbott on LBC radio, and she was like really forgot all the figures, all her numbers for everything, and she looked completely incompetent. And immediately, and this was well before the menopause was getting spoken about as much as it's getting spoken about now. And I think she was very unfairly kind of lambasted for that, because I just thought that is a woman who's just having a bit of brain fog at such an inconvenient time. She's live on the radio. She's trying to think of like these police figures, but she cannot articulate. And I was just like, oh my God, it's just became a car crash. But everyone was completely unsympathetic because, and then people said, well, she can't do the job then. She's incompetent. What do we do? And you look at how many women are leaving the workforce when they go through the menopause. What is the answer? You can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and think, well, that's it, they're done, because they've got all that wealth of experience and they might just have an off day. So that's why it is so important that, this message gets out there. I mean, what do you say to men who say, oh, menopause, it's fucking everywhere now. Everything's always about the menopause. I was reading a tribunal in the Times, I think it was last week, and a lady had taken her employer to the tribunal because she needed some time off work because she was having really debilitating menopause symptoms. And he was quoted as saying, everything is about fucking menopause these days. What would you say to men in those positions who are like that?
Yeah, and sometimes, people are quite resistant, but it's that appreciation that simply, men don't have a monthly hormonal cycle, for example. Men's pathways are different in terms of hormones. We all have the same hormones, interestingly, but obviously men don't have a monthly cycle.
Yeah, and it's the ratio of which you've got them as well.
Yeah, and neither do men have one hormone saying goodbye in such a dramatic way. So we don't have that reference point. And obviously, for some men, it's still stigmatized. People don't talk about it. Even some women that I've spoken to were like, I just didn't know. And the medical system told them it was all sorts of things when actually they were perimenopausal. So our understanding is still increasing. But, for men, it's just that realization of even sometimes hearing other men's stories. When, like a senior communications director, I was speaking with a group of 10 men from that industry, and at the end of the session, he stood up and he said, "You know what, lads? You're in your 30s and 40s. I'm in my 50s, and if there's one thing I want you to leave this session and go and do, is get some knowledge around the menopause. Go and do a bit of self-education. You know why? Because if I'd have done that, it'd have saved me 3 years of heartache with my partner, where I took it personally. I was like biting back. And actually, she was going through a hell of a time. She was struggling to find a way to explain it. And, it almost ripped us apart. And it was only when I went and started to learn and realized just how significant the symptoms can be, just how many there is, like over 60, and just how challenging it can be when all of a sudden your body changes and you're struggling to find the words for it.
Yeah.
When I kind of took a step back and realized what she was going through, I suddenly, instead of becoming angry about things, I became sympathetic, and it completely changed my mindset. And just hearing other men say that is quite powerful, because so often it's seen as, well, she's banging on about the menopause again. And even the work that I do,
or like use it as an excuse or something. Yeah.
And the thing is, no woman that I've met in like the hundreds that I've spoken to has said, I want a big spotlight shining on me saying I'm menopausal. I want lots of fuss making for me because I'm menopausal. None of them have said, I want, the whole world to change around me. What they've all said is, look, Lee, what I want is a little bit of support when my symptoms are really bad, a little bit of consideration for how hard it is some days, a little bit of flexibility just to kind of help me navigate and keep my performance where I want it to be, and a little bit of compassion, because it can be pretty brutal some days when everything just feels like it's falling apart. But the thing is that they all want a little bit of change to make it better. Don't treat me like I'm a problem, because I'm a person. I'm just getting through my symptoms in the best way that I can.
Yeah.
And I say that to men, you don't have to go and change the world. You don't need to become an expert. Hell, we're still learning so much because women's health has been underfunded, under-researched, and it's just not been considered for years. So we're still learning so much. But actually, men need to be part of the conversation, because we need to be part of normalizing it so we can speak about it more, not actually kind of, hiding behind the scenes and saying, oh, it's too much menopause.
Exactly. Yeah. And just kind of like burying your head in the sand on it. Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. And I hope that does happen in a lot more spaces and a lot more workplaces, whether it's the Davina effect or it's not. It's a great thing that we're talking about it. I know myself, I started getting interested in this subject, hormonal health originally, and then it kind of really shaped by menopause. I had lots of health retreat clients who were going through it, and I really wanted to understand it a bit better myself. And this was well before it was trendy. This was like 10 years ago. And when I started then, I mean, what I know now is so much more than what we knew then. It was all about a bit of hot flashes and a bit of irritability and whatever. But actually we know, there's well more symptoms than that. So I think definitely education's got better. And you're absolutely right in what you say. There isn't one woman on the planet that I've ever met who is like wants the complete world to change for them because they're going through the menopause. If anything, for me personally, I would, because I like to be seen as like this strong, capable individual, I would be, I don't know, ashamed's not the right word, but I wouldn't want anybody to know if I was going through that. And I would imagine that a lot of women who've got fantastic careers would actually be the same. They would rather struggle, not tell anyone, not seek support, don't want to tell their partner, because it's almost like, oh, well, I'm not that young anymore. It's reminding your partner, well, I'm no spring chicken now and blah, blah, blah. And then you've got to go through a lot of significant changes in your relationship too. Your relationship does change. I speak to women all day long who say, I'm just angry at my husband all the time. I'm angry at the children. I don't want sex. I don't want to let him to touch me. It has a huge effect on everything. And the partner then feels rejected, and the lady's confidence will go. Then if she's not performing in work, we paint a very bleak picture here, but that is the reality of what I hear every day with my customers. And I'm sure that you hear that when you speak to women too. And that's why this conversation is so important. I mean, we both are friends with the Gen M Collective.
Yeah.
And I think the work that they do is so important in getting brands to get on board with this too. I mean, sometimes we've been accused of meno washing, which is kind of like you're trying to make money out of our misery and menopause. And I'm like, it's a bit naive to think that, because I believe that when more competitors enter the market, the better products become for the consumer. And I know what that's like the Gen M collective is all about, really. What do you say to people who, are trying to make products to help the menopause?
Yeah, well, I think, no matter what you do, when a space is new and suddenly our awareness increases, it creates opportunity. And, we know the stuff through Gen M. We do know that brands, big brands, have real power to change narratives. And if we look across the world, it used to be countries that were the richest, biggest entities. Now it's brands.
Yeah.
Over 150 of the 200 richest entities are now companies and organizations. So they have so much power to influence, educate, and build awareness. And obviously, for years, there's a realization there of this, of the amount that women in this stage of life actually spend. They're seen as a marketplace. They're actually now like queen ages almost in that phase of life where they've got a level of freedom, even though the challenges they might have around their symptoms. But I think one of the biggest things is it's a market that's never been catered for. Just yesterday, I was at a tech festival and I asked the audience who's heard of femtech. Quite a lot of people stood up. I asked them, stay stood up if you know what the opposite of femtech is. And everyone, apart from one woman, sat down.
I wouldn't know the opposite of femtech.
The opposite of femtech is tech.
Yeah.
Because femtech's had to be created.
Yeah.
Because tech is kind of very male dominated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there is no men tech.
Yeah.
Because there doesn't need to be, because typical technological products just cater for men and their challenges. So there's no industry. So, you've come into an industry and you are, a small, very agile, forward-thinking company in that space. And, I understand sometimes you can look at the big brands and think they're kind of just tagging on a little bit onto what they're doing. What if they actually really put their weight behind it properly? Because, they've got billions of pounds on their balance sheet and they could actually be the ones truly leading on this. And a few brands have done that. A few brands have probably done things that looked externally as, maybe a bit.
There's a lot of people who pay a bit of lip service to it, whereas actually we sit down with the consumer and they lead our marketing decisions because they're who we're trying to cater for. Even though we're not a quote-unquote menopausal brand, we know that's a lion's share of our business though, but we cater for younger ladies too. But
it's really easy to look at something and make a judgment without knowing what happens behind the scenes, where it started, why it exists, the customer service that goes on.
Yeah.
Because most companies don't sit there shouting about that. They're doing the work. So it's easy to judge in the space. But actually, with me being a judge at Gen M, I get to see what happens, what brands are actually doing as they apply in the process. So I actually get to see a lot of really good stuff being done. Sometimes by the bigger brands, but sometimes by small brands massively punching above their weight.
Yeah. I would like to think that we are one of those brands.
Well, you won this year, did you not?
Exactly. That's the second Gen M award we've won. So we must be doing something right in the menopause space. But no, I'm really vocal about it and unapologetically vocal about it. I feel like these women do need support, and I try and be really unbiased. Even if they come to me and they say, sometimes I'll say, this is not the product for you, but I'm going to sign you posters to products that I think are going to be great for you. And I believe in women getting the best advice because I think they've been completely underserved by a lot. And I tell you what gets on my tits the most is people who prey on these women, and actually are not making a good product. They've now renamed something that they were already doing as a menopause product, and they're just jumping on the bandwagon. I disagree with that. And that's why it's so important. And that's why Gen M have started the MTIC. Yep. And there's some criteria behind what the MTIC is and who can get it and how they need to kind of almost prove the credentials of, well, this is truly a menopause product and this is how it helps somebody in the menopause because it helps with these symptoms. And the signposting is really important because consumers are overwhelmed and they don't know who to talk to. And the only way I said this to Sam Simister when she was on the podcast, I said, I have not been through the menopause, but I'm not that far away. So I think about it quite regularly and I think, well, what would I want? And the only way I could relate to it, and you're a father of two yourself, is when I was having a baby and when I was pregnant, how much the pregnant woman is catered for.
Yeah.
Not every woman will go through pregnancy, but everyone is supported through it in these big brands, in shops. You go in John Lewis, there's a whole entire floor dedicated to it.
Yeah.
You go into Boots, there's aisles dedicated to it. And every man is kind of on board. There's lots of products that cater for fathers as well.
Yeah.
And I believe that is going to become the new marketplace. I know Heather does a great talk from Gen M and she says like menopause is the new vegan. I believe that menopause is the new baby space, actually. Because, it would be nice if you walked into John Lewis, a brand that maybe you've grown up with all your life. You get your makeup done in there, you buy all your products there, you do your shopping in there. You've probably bought your first crib or pram or whatever from there. You trusted them with that. And then when you get to the menopause, you just dropped off. Like they're not there to hold your hand.
Yeah, it's gendered ageism is what it is.
Yeah.
And that exists within society. Women, get to a certain age and society tries to make them invisible and make them kind of not relevant. And that's really frustrating because it's those women who've, they've been on a journey, they've navigated a whole lot of barriers and challenges in society. They've often got a hell of a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, really defined skill sets, and are highly competent in what they do. And then society just tries to kind of gradually push them out.
Isn't that because they're evolutionary? Let's be honest, society is like geared up toward procreation, even in an animalistic way in your own brain. And men are wired up to find younger females attractive because they're fertile. So when they get older, they do not become seen anymore because they're almost not seen anymore. You can't kind of like unwire that in people's brains, which is kind of like, women disagree with me on this point all the time. And I'm like, listen, it's evolution. It's not, I'm the messenger here. Stop trying to shoot me. Do I think it's right? No, I don't. Listen, I think it's completely unjust and completely unfair, but what can we do about it? And that's why our slogan is be visible, because we do want these women who, are getting to 40s, 50s, 60s. They are fantastic. They have got a defined set of skills, but again, that society's got to shift.
Yeah, and I think it's a big thing because what we realise is it wasn't that long ago as humans that our only target was to survive long enough to procreate. And that was it. That was our target. Now we've created a world where we live long, way beyond that. But actually, that also gives us this lovely cognitive chunk on the front of our head, an ability to actually think rationally about the targets we create for ourselves in the societies we've got today, which means that we can actually think and create the world to become a better place. We've actually managed to sometimes make it a worse place.
Yeah.
And we could talk for hours about that, but that gives us numerous things. Firstly, women are able to actually continue to fight against that narrative. And there are some amazing examples of women in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s who are absolutely smashing it right on the front lines, showing what's possible. And that's really powerful to actually showcase, these ideas of becoming elderly, getting like a purple rinse and going sitting, doing...
and go booking a saga holiday.
And
start dating.
And it's just, women now in the 50s are like women used to be in the 30s.
Yeah.
Generations have changed, and actually they are finding, quite often, especially those in higher socioeconomic groups, are able to go and do amazing things, have energy, vitality to do these things. And sometimes the menopause symptoms become a bit of a challenge, but actually they're breaking through that and showing what's possible. Obviously, the bigger part of that is flipping society's narratives around this, because, why do women suddenly get shifted out, but men are suddenly, grey foxes, really wise, like all of a sudden they're experienced and, like cultured and also, and it's the truth is men and women are no different in that respect. They've both lived on a journey. They've both picked up knowledge. They've both got years of experience. And actually, that's where I feel it should be treated equally. And, we can look at the kind of the objectification of women, because truth is there isn't really a right age to be if you're a woman. If we look at it, when you're
No,
young,
absolutely.
when you're young, you're objectified, you're
Yeah.
not that experienced, you get a little bit like shuffled out a little bit. And then you kind of hit that middle-age range, and that's when you're most likely to have children, start a family, and companies look at you and they're a bit like, oh, she's a bit of a pregnancy risk, that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
We might lose her after a year or two. And as a small business, like we've spoken about before, we both own small businesses. It's massive when you lose one of your core team members.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to find someone to replace that. And it causes so much disruption because you've got a small team.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard sometimes. But at the same time, especially for bigger companies, some of the discrimination that I've heard is shocking.
Yeah.
The truth is that after that phase, you're then in menopause territory. And, all of a sudden you're too experienced and you've got too, and so I just think about, I'm so lucky to be a man because I can just coast along from a hormonal perspective, but also from a perspective of there isn't really, I'm one of these men who I'm almost 40, but sometimes I look quite young because I'm a bit colourful in that.
Yeah.
So people make assumptions that I'm younger, and that's not always a good thing sometimes in my space. But what I will say, Alyssa, is, there is beauty in what we've spoken about before, about men and women aren't just this binary thing. Biologically, we're closer than we understand.
Yeah.
But there are some differences that have never truly been looked at or funded in the way that they should be.
Yeah.
So much research is done on male cells because they don't have hormonal cycles. It takes away a variable, but it means that, doses of medication is all based on men.
Yeah.
A lot of considerations for how symptoms and things appear from a cellular level are based on men. So much of the world is just
based on men. Like, when they test cars and car crashes and things like that.
Symptoms for, we can go on and on.
Yeah.
And if you don't, read Invisible Women.
I was just about to say, there's a great book called Read Invisible Women. It's
it is crazy, but fundamentally, like we've also spoken about before, every single human being is unique. If we can foster a world where people can bring that uniqueness, because men and women have their own set of masculine and feminine traits and masculine and feminine energies, and you'll meet some women who could almost appear more male, and a man who could appear more female in the way that they approach the world, their mindset, the way that they think, the energy they put off. But actually, we need to create a world where it's okay to be you.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, because then that, the truth is, the stuff that happens to women stops men being themselves as well.
Yeah.
If we can work to make the world more gender balanced and gender equitable, what actually happens is men can become more themselves as well, express themselves in a way, the man that they are. And that allows us to actually start to impact some of the things that impact men.
Yeah.
And make the world better, especially for young men who just, so many of them, I talk to them, I do a lot of work in colleges. They say, I don't really know what it's going to be a man. Like, when I go out into the workplace, I feel like I'm getting a lot of flack for being a man because of what my granddad did and the way he was in the world, and the way that my granddad's generation just used to go around and smack women on the bottom.
I was literally thinking smacking asses and
just treating women like pieces of meat, and that was all good for that generation. But these young lads are that's not right. But I feel sometimes society is still punishing me for what generations have done in the past, and I feel a bit disenfranchised and don't know where I stand and don't really know what to do. And I'm like, let's just take a step back and think, okay, even becoming a man and understanding who you are is a journey. You've got to build that self-awareness. You've got to understand the man that you can be and that you want to be, and how you can best bring that to the world. And it's actually kind of realizing that sometimes that disenfranchisement can take men off, and they go and look online for what success look like. How can I earn six-figure salary?
Well, then you get the Andrew Tates kind of of the world, who are feeding into these people who are now which is, I'm not saying, do you know what? Some of the stuff he says is probably true. And there's a lot of stuff that's horrendous, and he's a horrible individual. But, and he's just a bit aggressive in his delivery and things. But how old are you now, Lee? 38, 39?
Yeah.
Yeah, same age as me. Okay, so we grew up at the same time. And I tell you what's shifted for me, the younger generations will watch a movie like American Pie. Right? I grew up from watching this, and I recognised all that behaviour as the norm.
Yep.
It's completely normal, right? Yeah, young boys who've got testosterone running around, and the whole movie is geared up to them trying to lose their virginities, and they're using subterfuge and trying to get these girls to sleep with them, and that's their complete A game. That's the goal.
Yep.
And that And that's kind of the behaviour I saw growing up too.
Yeah.
You know, on both sides. So but these younger generation are horrified by that. They're like, literally the whole movie's about like this lad trying to have sex with a girl. And we're like, well, yeah, isn't that what teenagers' years are all about? But they're like horrified by that behaviour now. And it's amazing to see how much it's shifted in such a small period of time, because it doesn't feel that long ago.
No.
That, well, let's say it's like 15-ish years ago that we were watching things like that and thinking that, well, that's really normal.
Well, you got to think of this, that, you know, when we used to go out clubbing, when we were like not 18, because you used to be able to get in back then.
Exactly, like 15, 16 I was going out.
We'd be getting drunk and like jumping over bushes and falling over, and nobody was filming it.
Exactly.
No one was taking pictures of us like in a pile of our own sick or anything like that. And now they live in a world where anything that you do gets filmed, gets uploaded, gets documented. They live in a world of social media where I look back and reflect, you know what? Like, I knew what my friends were up to, but beyond that, I didn't have that much exposure to the world.
No.
And now there's so many different influences that young people see, and it has made them, you know, more reserved. They're less likely to drink, you know. All of a sudden, there's so much judgment and there's so much so many things that can go wrong. And
backlash of what goes online will really affect their future as well. We didn't have that. We could kind of I think we were the last generation, but realistically, we lived before the internet.
Yep.
You know, we had a whole childhood without the internet. So I used to go and play out and I'd just be back for tea time as long as, like, no mobile phone, no one could get hold of you.
Nope.
And it was like, there's no fear. Now, we've got more tech to be able to track our children, you know, with air tags and whatever, and yet we're more fearful than ever. Why is that? I wonder this myself, because I've just had a little girl and I think, would I let her go out by herself on a bike like I used to go out all day?
Well, there's numerous different things. Obviously,
is it because we're exposed to more bad things? Like, I've stopped watching the news.
Yeah, a big thing for us is, like, we live in a world where now we hear and see about, you know, all the negative things that are happening all over the world all the time. You can watch things on social media over and over again, hear things spoken about, you know, there's news everywhere. Suddenly we are exposed to a lot of negativity, which kind of takes away from the fact that actually the risk is so much lower. There is a lot of surveillance now. I think actually things probably happen less than they did when we were kids.
Yeah.
But you just see every single thing that happens.
It wasn't on everyone's tongue all the time, because they weren't seeing it getting beamed into their...
And there weren't anywhere near as many cars, for example. So one of our things we tend to worry about when we're sending our kids out on our bikes is getting run over. Obviously, when we were younger, you know, most families had one car if they were lucky, whereas now everyone's got a car. And the world is built around that. So, you know, some things have become a little bit more challenging. But we now live in a world where, you know, I suppose even us as parents, we don't always appreciate our own childhood and the freedom that we had. And like you said, you go play out and you come back when it got dark, or when when your parents came to find you, and they knew you'd find you on a field somewhere. I start to think about, you know, a lot of these free spaces, you know, houses have been chucked up, and some of the places where I played as a kid are just a housing estate now. And they were just big fields to play on. So the world has changed, but I think that we become more scared and scarce in our own things.
And with tech, everyone, the kids just won't go and play out. They won't even play out in the garden. I'm like, just go outside. We haven't got any internet at the moment because we've just moved house. And I'm like, they're like, we haven't got any internet. I'm like, go outside then. Like, go outside. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're like, what? Like, it's like alien to them. Do you know what I mean? I'm just like, Christ, I used to be out on my bike all day, or my partner would go fishing all day when he was a little boy, and just doing these pursuits. But
I think, you know what, it's like the world has changed. In some ways, we're starting to like think like, oh God, this young generation.
I'm turning into my grandma.
Everyone gets there, right? And it's appreciation that they've just grown up in a world where tech is everywhere, and they're swiping on stuff, you know, from being such a young kid. And you can't remove that from your children, because when they become adults, they'll go into a world where it's everywhere and they'll just gorge on it in a really bad and uncontrolled way. So the thing that I've done with my kids is I've tried to introduce these things to them, try to explain how they work. You know, why you're going to get these videos on YouTube Kids if you watch this one. It's start trying to learn what you like to show you some more, trying to get them to understand how the technology works so they can try and become the masters. So you have to put like little guardrails on, like a bit of a, you know, time limit on things to help them kind of learn how to use things, but also learn that, you know, it is unlimited. but actually, you should try and limit it so you can do other stuff. So just trying to help your kids become masters of the technologies they've got rather than let the technology master them. Because the billions of pounds is spent on hooking people in to use these things, and all the best kind of people scientists are employed by all these tech companies, so they know exactly how to get people to use them.
Okay. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. It's like food, food is geared up to get it to that bliss point where you're addicted. Like, I look at bread and it's hard. It's a bloody challenge for me to go, no, I'm not having that, It's hard. And I know I'm fighting against, big corporations that have got that bread to that perfect bliss point that my brain is going to really switch on and love it. Do you think as a society, our children, are we just too soft? Like one of the questions when I was reading all this, you've overcome lots of obstacles. I read somewhere else that did you have to learn to walk again?
Yeah.
So that was like, so I'm thinking, this guy is the guy that he is because you've had hardship, because you faced adversity. And actually, if we're making, nerfing the world and making it so much more equal and blah, 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 and we're taking the obstacles away, is it going to be better for society? Are we making it weaker and people less capable?
Yeah, I'd say equal and safe are different things, right?
Okay.
So it's almost like for example, you want children to learn how to wipe the bottom, right? Because that's going to end in a bad way if you don't teach them how to do that. But that's keeping them safe from like infecting themselves. So there's a reason to do that. But completely removing all the risks when they're playing, like wrapping everything in like bubble wrap.
Yeah.
It's like that. The problem is we learn how to take risks by taking risks.
Yeah.
And we learn how to manage those risks by pushing it too far, falling over, hurting ourselves, getting up and carrying on. And obviously we now live in a world where, again, we've got those activations in our brain through the stuff we do around safety all the time.
Yeah.
The problem is that with young girls, we tell them to play safe a hell of a lot more than we do with young boys. And that plays through their whole lives. So even when they get in the workplace, they play it safe. They don't speak up when they should do. Well, not everyone does. Depends how you've been parented.
Yeah.
But how you've been parented plays a big role in then how you turn up as an adult.
Yeah.
And if you've been told to play it safe, you're less likely to go forward for that promotion.
Yeah.
You're less likely to call out the stuff that's happening because you've been told ever since you're young, play it safe. Whereas generally boys are told, go and smash it. Go and have a go. Go and try. So I suppose this kind of work around trying to make the world a bit more equal, it's less equal and more equitable, where people get the same opportunities. And even those who started the race behind actually get an opportunity to catch up a little bit before everyone starts the race. Does that mean that the person who's the fastest is still going to win? Yeah. But the person who started
at their starting point, which is all the same.
Yeah,
I completely agree with that.
And the best person to win the race will still win the race.
Exactly.
Those who trained, those who performed, will outsprint those who haven't. But it's getting people up to that start line together.
Yeah.
And that's what equity is. And that's really important. So that's why it is for me, fundamentally.
I completely agree with that. I just believe in life's so comfortable. I say it to myself all the time. Life is so comfortable sometimes. I drive a nice car. I get in a nice bed. I've got a nice house. Everything's too good. In fact, life's so good. I actually actively have to go find obstacles for myself to do because I feel there's no growth happening within myself. And I feel like a lot of kids need that too. So they need, I believe in pushing people physically in terms of like physical pursuits. I feel like a lot of growth can happen there. Somebody who can't run doing a marathon is unbelievable. Be amazing for their growth and development.
Yeah.
And I think that can't stop either. And
it's in the discomfort that you learn.
Absolutely.
And actually it's in the adversity. When you get through it, you learn the most about yourself. So I think about what's happened to me on my journey. Like when I got ill and had to learn to walk again, that's when I learned the most about myself.
Yeah.
Second time, when I had mental health problems at uni, dropped out and managed to get myself in a good place and get back. Third time in my life, I learned the most about myself when I got made redundant from my grad scheme. All those things you read at the start, all those awards, all that recognition, numerous successful businesses, I've learned most from the things that have gone wrong. I've not even learnt that much from the things that have gone right. So, an ability to actually put yourself in uncomfortable situations, which is why I'm sat here talking about the menopause, right? Because that's not a comfortable thing to do. But you've got to have those conversations. And even for men who are like, I don't want to say the wrong thing around this kind of stuff. I'm like, you're a leader. Leaders do uncomfortable things. Leaders make decisions without all the data. Leaders lean in and actually work things out. Well, stop worrying about saying the wrong thing and go and ask the question and go and see what needs to be done. If we're going to actually actively change the world, we've got to get uncomfortable. And yeah, in this world today, people don't realize what they're not grateful for, right? I wasn't grateful for walking. Then I couldn't walk.
Yeah.
I couldn't go and like shower myself or go to the toilet or feed myself properly. And all of a sudden you're lying there like, damn.
You took it so for granted.
Took it all for granted. And now it's gone. I'm like, I'm going to think differently about things. And just realizing that situation, you know what? Never truly been hungry or homeless, had free healthcare, had some free education. I've had the freedom to set up a business. I've lived, I've got 2 healthy children. I'm back walking. I'm still alive. Like, there's a hell of a lot to be grateful for. And really, there's nothing more powerful than starting to realize that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great place to wrap up. And I think absolutely the best things do come from adversity, as you're a shining example of, Lee, to be honest. So I feel like I could talk to you forever, but we do need to wrap it up. But thanks so much for coming to chat to us today.
No, pleasure, Alyssa.
Thank you.